Hi, I'm historian Claire Ridgway, and today we're going to be looking at a topic that's often overshadowed by the kings and queens, their grand palaces, political drama, and the glittering courts of the Tudor age. And that's poverty. We often refer to Elizabeth I's reign as a golden age, and in many ways it was. But for thousands of people, that era was marked not by prosperity, but by hardship, hunger, and struggle. So who were the poor in Tudor England? Why were so many people in desperate circumstances? And how did the governments and local communities try to help them? Well, let's take a look. Firstly, let's look at why there were so many poor people in Tudor England. Well, there were 6 main causes of widespread poverty in the Tudor period. 1. Rising population. The population of England and Wales grew from about 3 million in 1530 to 4 million by 1600. That's a huge increase, and it put pressure on resources. Demand for goods rose, prices went up, and many people simply couldn't keep up. Number 2, changes in farming. Landowners began enclosing common land, cutting off access for villagers who'd once grazed animals there. There was a shift from arable farming to sheep farming, which required fewer workers and less labour. That meant job losses and food shortages. Number 3, bad harvests. The 1590s saw a series of terrible harvests, particularly from 1594 to 1597. Areas like Cumbria were especially hard hit, and people starved to death. Number 4, inflation and wages. Prices rose sharply, but wages fell. With a surplus of labour, workers had little bargaining power, and even those in work often couldn't afford the basics. Number 5, taxation. There were increases in taxation, further squeezing those already struggling to make ends meet. Number 6, decline in the wool trade. The wool trade had been a cornerstone of England's economy, but demand dropped, leading to unemployment in many areas. And let's not forget the dissolution of the monasteries under King Henry VIII. Monasteries had provided food, clothing, and shelter to the poor, and their closure removed that safety net. It also meant a rise in poor people, with monks and nuns being left homeless and without support. By the late Tudor period, people in poverty were categorised into 3 groups. 1. The impotent poor, those who genuinely couldn't work due to age, disability or illness. 2. The able-bodied poor, people who could work and wanted to, but just couldn't find employment. 3. Rogues and vagabonds, those seen as unwilling to work and prone to begging or crime. There was a real fear around vagabondage. Some people believed beggars travelled in gangs, spoke in coded language and posed a threat to social order. So how did the Tudor monarchs respond? From the mid-1500s, the government passed a series of poor laws to tackle both poverty and the perceived threat of vagrancy. I'm going to give you a very quick, brief overview of some key laws. 1551, the Act of the Provision and Relief of the Poor. Each parish was to appoint a collector of alms, keep a register of licensed poor people, and build a workhouse where people could work without wages, but in exchange for food and a roof over their heads. King Edward VI even allowed Bridewell Palace in London to be used as such a house. 1563, the Act for the Relief of the Poor. People who refused to contribute to poor relief after being urged by the church could be fined. 1572, the Vagabonds Act. Unlicensed beggars could be whipped, mutilated, or even executed for repeat offences. But this act also required local authorities to register the poor and collect money to help them. Then in 1575 there was the Poor Act. Parishes had to provide materials like wool or flax so that the unemployed could be set to work. 1597, the Act for the Relief of the Poor. This introduced overseers of the poor who collected a poor rate, a local tax, and distributed money, food or clothing. Finally, 1601, the Act for the Relief of the Poor, or the Elizabethan Poor Law. This built on previous laws and created a more organised nationwide system. The impotent poor were cared for in almshouses. The able-bodied were sent to houses of industry to work, and poor children could become apprentices. And rogues and vagabonds, they were punished in houses of correction or prisons. It was a major shift. Poor relief became compulsory and tax-funded. And though harsh by today's standards, it was more structured than anything that had come before. But as well as government legislation, there were also local initiatives. In Lincoln, idle youths were apprenticed in 1551. In Boston, Lincolnshire, a knitting school created jobs for 400 poor people in 1591. But the scale of the problem, the poverty, the poor people, the beggars, it was vast. In Norwich by 1570, there were over 2,000 beggars in the city alone. If you want to explore this further, I highly recommend Edith Burrows' excellent thesis, Poor Relief in Tudor England, and Peter D. Riley's Rich and Poor in Tudor Times. I'll link to them in the description. And if you're interested in the charitable work of Tudor queens and noblewomen, I've written an article on the Anne Boleyn files about Anne Boleyn's charitable giving, and I'll share a link to that too. Thank you for joining me today with this kind of overview of Tudor poor laws, Tudor poverty. It's a very different side of Tudor life, isn't it? And one that we shouldn't forget. And if you've enjoyed this video, do give it a like and subscribe for more Tudor history, from the crown to the common people. Take care, and I'll see you soon. In Norwich by 1570, there were over 2,000 beggars in the city alone. Whew.